This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Rod Mullins. We're going to do our weekly talk about NASCAR. And, boy, there's a lot going on now. Of course, we're in the playoff part of the season. And let's start with Vegas. Brad Keselowski comes away with the win. In overtime, the race goes 5 extra laps because of restarts. And lots of moving up and down. I mean, Keselowski gets the win, but then, there are some playoff contenders, Rod, who had suffered some adverse effects from some of the crashes. Take us into Vegas and get us through that thicket of all the stuff going on out there.
Well, Chris, 8 of 16 drivers that were in the playoffs did not fare as well this past weekend in Las Vegas. And Las Vegas is not been known as a track for, I guess, the thing that will slip up and get you before it's over with. But it did this past weekend. And Brad Keselowski was the beneficiary of all of this trouble that went on for some of the drivers. An example, let me just tell you this. This is one thing that kind of dawned on me. Jake Elliott finished 36th in that race. And when he finished 36th, he was taken out by Jamie McMurray, which kind of opens up another slot here to maybe a rant that I have, and that is when you get those 16 top playoff contenders in contention for a win in one of these races, should these guys that did not make the playoffs, that get knocked out of it, should they be entitled to racing for the rest of the season? I know that sponsorship and things like that go very far, but Jamie McMurray has nowhere to go. He's not trying to he's missed out on the playoffs. He got knocked out of it and yet takes playoff contender out. But they say that's part of the whole sport, part of the playoff system. So, give or take right there, that caused some problems this past weekend. But for Brad Keselowski, he said he didn't have the fastest car overall on the day. He just had the best car when it counted right. And he ended up picking up his third consecutive win, of course, Darlington and the Brickyard, and then this past weekend at Las Vegas. And what's even more exciting, the 500 total team win for Penske Racing. And they threw a big ado down in Charlotte, down in North Carolina, after they got back from the race at Las Vegas. Brad Keselowski put Roger Penske and the Penske team, the captain, over the top of that 500 win.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Go back to something you said a couple minutes ago, Rod, about the playoff field being set, but then everyone else is still out there. And I've thought about that too, and I wondered if it was just me thinking, wow, it's kind of weird that, like right now we're gearing up for the Major League Baseball playoffs, and, just imagine, the World Series gets disrupted by, like the Miami Marlins coming in and knocking out the starting pitcher for the Yankees or the Cubs or something like that. There's no equivalent in any other sport. Once the playoff field is set in every other sport, the teams, the groups that are out there who don't make the playoffs, they're done for the season. And yeah, it's an economics move as much as anything else. Those teams want to go out there that didn't make the playoffs, and they still have a chance to compete for money and that kind of thing. But man, that is odd. You would think that we would narrow it down, and those 16 would be in the mix. And do you ever see? I mean, has there been talk about that, Rod? About the idea of maybe in the future we'll look at narrowing the field down to just those racers, or is it just the way it is and it's always going to be that way?
There's not really been any talk of things like that, but this is one of those things that comes up with me that I've always looked at and I thought, okay, you're a playoff contender, you make it into the race, but say you've had a bad run-in with somebody through the season, and then, that person has everything to gain, nothing to lose by just going and getting a little bit of revenge on one of those teams. And I know some people might think that that's a little bit childish to some degree, but, that's what NASCAR is with a lot of this stuff. NASCAR has gotten to that point where it's kind of it's fueled this a little bit more. But, in my opinion, I think that they really ought to consider an elimination thing out of it, that if you finish in you start maybe with the top 25 or the top 30 teams, and then you whittle those, say, hey, for the rest of you 14 cars that are out there, you didn't make the chase, you weren't able to make it, you just don't need to be in this next set of races. And so your season's kind of over with at that point. Then you have that other set of racers that's in there. You drop so many of them off after a certain point. If you take those out, So you whittle down to who you have, and then, as far as I'm concerned, I think you make it as a mad dash for the cash at the end of the Homestead race in November. That's kind of my thinking behind it, but I don't know if NASCAR will ever come around to that kind of thinking on it.
Yeah, I'll buy your series. I like that. That sounds like exciting TV to me too as well. So we'll talk some more. We got racing coming up this weekend at Richmond Saturday night, assuming the weather holds out under the lights. I say because I've been at a Richmond race that got moved to a Sunday afternoon, which boring. You know, when you have a chance to be under the lights, you get moved the next afternoon. It's just not quite the same. But we'll hope the weather holds out. There is a chance of rain Saturday night in Central Virginia, so we'll see. But Richmond coming up, and of course Rod's heading down in a couple of weeks to Charlotte for the Roval race, which will be very interesting. But let's go to some off-the-track news first. Gene Haas Racing Haas Stewart Racing still looking for a driver for the 41 car. What's the latest there?
Well, right now, up in the air, they're looking at a lot of people. Gene Haas is, and if you're not familiar with Gene Haas, he is part of the partnership there of Stewart Haas Racing. Now, Tony Stewart brings the name recognition in with the Stewart part on that end of the racing deal. But Gene Haas has been involved in racing for a number of years. He's got a CNC fabrication shop. He's been known worldwide for a lot of the things that he's done. And Tony Stewart has kind of relinquished certain things to Gene Haas in this kind of partnership that they have. Although Tony Stewart ended up getting such drivers as Clint Boyer, also Kevin Harvick, and then Eric Almirola. This last decision for Gene Haas was left up to him, and he made the decision to get Kurt Busch here a couple of years ago. But a lot of people thought that Kurt Busch was just washed up. That why in the world will you take a chance on this man who goes and jumps somebody in the pits like Jerry Punch, says all these things to him. But, he rebounded back. He kind of cleaned up his image a little bit more. Aside from at the one point of saying that his head had been bashed into the side of a motorhome by someone who was a trained spy. That's another story for another day, though. But, you have this, and Kurt Busch comes back, and he starts winning races, and he does so under the Stewart Haas Racing banner. Well, now Kurt Busch is going to be gone. He's not going to be under that banner anymore. But he's looking. There are a lot of people that are saying right now that he's going to Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, to me, I think that makes a lot of sense right there. Kurt Busch has really rebounded that team back, that 41 team, since he started there at Stewart Haas. So it'll be interesting to see who they're going to plug into that. Responsibilities could be Daniel Suarez. I don't know if he'll step into that role. Ryan Newman could step into that role, but I don't see Ryan Newman stepping back into the Stewart Haas camp because he raced there for a little while with Tony Stewart, wasn't very happy with it, then went to Richard Childress, and he's been happy at Richard Childress, but not happy enough to stay another year or two onto a contract. So we could be seeing Daniel Suarez. I don't know about Jamie McMurray. A lot of people are wondering where Jamie McMurray is going to fall into this. You already had Casey Kane, who has said, I'm not coming back. I'm going to deal more in the sprint car series. So you've got an open seat there. You really don't know who's going to take that position until the time is right.
Yeah, I was going to ask next about Ryan Newman. You already talked about he's leaving Richard Childress Racing. Also, Trevor Bayne being replaced at Roush Fenway. So some more comings and goings news. Talk about the latest involving those two stories.
Well, Ryan Newman, like I mentioned, is not going to be at Richard Childress Racing next year. It's just kind of a mutual party is what they're going to be doing. Now, whether or not Ryan Newman will materialize back on another team's, under their banner this year, that'll remain to be seen of what will happen. But I think the most interesting thing that happened out of this past week, and it was done right after we recorded last week's podcast, was of all the things in the world, here goes Jack Roush. And Jack Roush sits down with an interview with Claire D. Lang on Sirius XM Radio on the NASCAR channel. And of all the things in the world, Jack Roush makes it public on Sirius XM Radio that he's replacing Trevor Bayne. I think it was already a preconceived thing that he was going to be leaving the series. He was going to be leaving at least Jack Roush in Fenway Racing. But the way that Jack Roush did it was just totally, I think, very unprofessional for a man who's been involved in the sport for so long. He broke the news to one person. He did it in an interview when the formal announcement should have been just made and said Trevor Bayne will not return to Roush Fenway Racing for 2019. Now, where does that put Trevor Bayne? A lot of people don't know right now at this point. And I really cannot jump down Trevor Bain's throat for any of the stuff that he did while he was at Roush Fenway Racing, because to me, I think it reflects a lot on the team, and it reflects on the funding, and it reflects a lot on where the emphasis had been placed in Jack Roush's organization. And a lot of that had switched over to Ricky Stenhouse this past year, because Stenhouse had won 2 big races last year. He won a Talladega race, and people were looking at him saying, "Hey, this guy's really coming around." Stenhouse has been in the thick of things this year, but he hasn't won any kind of big races out of it. So, where Trevor Bain's going to land, that remains to be seen. They're still talking about Matt Kenseth driving in a limited capacity for Jack Roush next year. I mean, who knows? Rod Newman may show up at the Jack Roush racing stable before it's over with, but they're going to have to do a lot of improvement if they're going to get him back into a team that's going to be a contender again, because Roush Fenway has not been that serious of a contender here for the last 3 or 4 years.
So we've given you some news from the track, some from the garage. Now let's go to the courtroom. There's a couple stories we've got to work from the courtroom angle here. First, Brian France pleads not guilty to DWI charges. What's the latest there?
Latest there is there will be a next set of hearings, or at least a hearing that will take place around October 5th or 6th, and that will discuss a little bit more. Pretty much what we got was the rehash of what had happened, how he had been arrested that night for alcohol, the smell of it. He blew, I think, a 0.18, I think, on the breathalyzer when they did that. But they also found pills in his possession, which later checked out to be oxycodone pills. Now, that's 2 strikes right there on him, but he has pleaded not guilty, so it's going to be interesting to find out what Brian France's reasoning is behind this. I mean, if he blew that .18 and he was acting erratic on the road and then in possession of oxycodone pills, that's big news. Now, what's going to happen with him, we don't know. There'll be another hearing coming up on October 5th or 6th, and they'll try to determine what direction or what course that the state, especially the state of New York, is going to take with this case.
The other bit of news, the wrongful death suit against Tony Stewart has been, I guess, hanging out there for at least the last couple of years, has been dismissed. Is this the end of this, or is there any sense that there may be other legal wranglings involving that situation from that race, that dirt track race from a few years ago?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty much it's over. It's done. I know that the family of that young man that was killed in that accident has pretty much said over and over that Tony Stewart was at fault for that. Well, that was part of the whole thing. Tony Stewart did hit him, but Tony Stewart's the only person that knows if he got angry, if he intentionally tried to rattle his cage, whatever the case may be. Tony Stewart's the man that's going to have to answer for that. He says it was an accident. We go by his word on that it was an accident. And, of course, there was evidence that came out later on in the case that the young man that had been smoking marijuana, there was some traces of marijuana in his bloodstream in the autopsy. So there's a little bit of both, 2 sides to this whole thing between the Wright family and then Tony Stewart. But for Tony Stewart, the settlement has been made, and they've got 30 days or so many days to be able to appeal this, and whether or not they're going to take this to another step in the court process. But I think it's dead. I think the settlement's there. Unfortunately, a life was lost out of it, but also the monetary payment has been paid out through insurance and everything else. So I think it's kind of dead right now at this point.
So now we'll go to Richmond, turn our attention to Richmond this weekend. Again, a Saturday night under the lights is the schedule. And the first bit of news, before we talk about the race itself, a friend of the show, I guess I can claim, the Virginia Governor, Ralph Northam. He's a VMI graduate. He was a guest once on, I'm the VMI football radio play-by-play guy, and I do the halftime show as well. And I had him on the halftime show a couple years ago. I think his 30th reunion year was 2016. So a VMI graduate, gosh, everything else. He was a Army medical doctor, served in the military during our overseas wars in the early 2000s. Now he's Virginia governor. Now he's been slated. He's going to serve as the honorary starter for the Richmond race. But I'm confused. I read about this, Rod. He's going to be behind the car on the track, behind the wheel on the track, right? As we're getting ready to start the Richmond race this weekend.
Well, if he does that, he'll be like in the pace car. If he does that, if he's the honorary starter, he'll be the man that gets there and gives the command to start the engine is what he'll do. So, but I'm sure that probably some way along the line, knowing that his position, they may take him around in the pace car a couple of times, and he may have some fun doing that. But he still is going to be for a big deal and a big race coming up in Richmond this weekend. And right now at this point, I do know one thing. This is going to be Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s last NASCAR Xfinity race for his career. He's going to be racing this weekend, and he said that this is probably the last one for him. He's not going to be racing anymore after that, and he'll spend most of his time on, of course, on Saturday night, focusing on what he's going to do for the race coverage on NBC. But for this big race coming up, you've got some different scenarios kind of taking place here. On the Xfinity side, I read a really good article today about Elliott Sadler trying to break the bridesmaid curse that he seems to have. He's come so close, and this Emporia, Virginia native has tried so hard to win a championship. He wants to win another championship, and he doesn't mince words. He's probably one of the oldest drivers, aside from Morgan Shepherd, who's raced in the Xfinity Series. But he is deserving of at least a shot at the championship. So we're going to see whether or not he can pick up a win at Richmond this weekend, which would be good for Virginia fans of Elliott Sadler and the whole Sadler family. They'd love to see that, and that could propel him even further into the Homestead playoffs. And then we've got, of course, the Monster Cup Series race that's going to be taking place. That'll be interesting to see how some of these teams rebound back from Las Vegas last week. And some of those teams that are looking for good performances will be the Hendrick stable cars. That consists of Johnson, Bowman, and Chase Elliott in that big truck there. You're also going to see some of the Fords that are going to be looking to do well. Tony Stewart's team has done well when they've been at Richmond, but it's mostly been a Chevrolet track for the past few seasons. But I would not rule out, of course, the Toyota run, and that would be Kyle Busch in there. Martin Truex likes this kind of race. This is the kind of race that he likes, especially Saturday night racing. It brings the thrill back to everyone there in the stand. It's under the lights. It's a little bit different kind of situation of racing in the day, and he's one of those people that really wants to see more night racing on the schedule, and I kind of agree with him. I think it lends a whole new dimension to the spirit of NASCAR, and that's what NASCAR was founded on, running a lot of night races in these smaller tracks around the country. But aside from that, Mark Truex is going to have a good performance this weekend. He didn't fare well in Las Vegas this past weekend. He's looking to rebound back with at least a win or a top 5, top 10 performance. Chase Elliott's looking for another big race right there to where he can maybe get himself in a better position as they start jogging before they go to Charlotte, because I'll tell you, if you thought Las Vegas was not going to be that much of an influential race, you wait till we go to Charlotte in the Roval next weekend when they race on the 29th and 30th. That's going to be huge. It's going to be a untested, so to speak, racetrack for these guys, and they better get their short track experience in at Richmond, because when they go to the Roval next week at Charlotte, it's no holds barred. This is going to be probably the wildest race we'll ever watch, probably in a number of years, and all in one day and one weekend, as a matter of fact, Xfinity and Monster Cup Series. So this will be a big race, but Charlotte will be even bigger next week with the way they change things around.
UVA Virginia Tech football fans, your games are already over by the time this race is scheduled to start. 7:43 scheduled start time. Saturday night, so your games will be over. You can sit back and enjoy it. It's Richmond. If you get a chance to go, I love going to Richmond and watching races there. I love this track. The atmosphere is awesome, and so that's 7:43 p.m. scheduled start Saturday night. And also, I would say for folks out there, follow Ron on Twitter. Ron, what is your Twitter handle?
Well, my Twitter handle is RoderickM926 on Twitter. So you can follow me there, and we usually post some things on there. Sometimes when we get up there and post that, we'll put the AFT, sign down in order for people to be able to follow us as well, and retweet it, get some retweets out there about things, because that's how we'll mostly cover some things, especially this coming weekend, and then also in Charlotte next weekend.
Yeah, that's right. I was going to say you during races leading up to, there's a lot on Rod's feed. That keeps up with NASCAR. Also, I got to say Southwest Virginia high school football. So if you want to keep up with what's going on in high school football in Southwest Virginia. Rod's also pretty good for that too, right, Rod?
Well, I appreciate the call on that. Thank you. I never thought of myself that much of, really thinking of high school football back this way, but got to see a great game this past weekend. Two of the top undefeated teams in this end of the state with Ridgeview High School and with Union High School, and Ridgeview came out the winner of that one, and I'll tell you, it was a good game. It was a defensive struggle right down to the very end, and Ridgeview ended up coming out on that one, on the winning end on that one. So we'll give you some updates on things like that so far on the weekend too.
That's right. So that's and we'll link to that on our website. And of course we're looking forward to Rod and being able to get down to Charlotte in a couple of weeks. Well, Rod, for now, thanks for your time.
I appreciate it, Chris. Thanks for having me.